Welcome to the February 8th edition, the first Super Bowl week edition of the PFF Forecast. We have, as we are wont to do, bring in some cool people to the podcast. So we have Drew Dinsick, who we've talked to before remotely. I've been told he's way better in person, so we'll see if that is true. We're going to talk about Super Bowl. We're going to talk about Eric's budding TikTok career as a TikTok bettor. That and a lot more. Let's rock. Welcome. It's nice to meet you.
Yes.
You look similar to your picture on, it's like sometimes you meet someone, you're like, oh, wow, Photoshop.
I just got to say, it's great to meet you guys. Obviously, welcome to Los Angeles. Although I don't really feel like I need to welcome you here because you have a tan glow like you have been in LA or been at least in the warm confines of the Western U.S. for the last several weeks. So
I
welcome
look
back.
every bit the
Thank you.
Cincinnati.
Yeah, Eric looks like he has been through an ice storm. It's funny. We're in this room, which, as you guys can see, is like pretty darn big. It's also about as warm as Cincinnati is right now.
Unbelievable. I brought like a few sweatshirts. I even and I don't know why I did. Like, I think maybe my wife was like, you should take it. I'm like, Steph, it's like warm in LA, and it's unseasonably warm, right?
Yeah,
and
it's getting warmer.
And people were like, why are you bringing sweatshirts? I was like, I let Jesus take the wheel with this one or whatever. And I show up, and it actually was worthwhile to have sweatshirts here because it's like 55 degrees in here. It feels like
it's not warm. You really have to be juiced up and excited.
Yeah, which we are.
Game of football,
to be fair, but we're juiced up and excited, and we are fully clothed, which is perfect.
That's a good point. We could have done this poolside. There are, maybe that's what we'll do later in the week.
Well, my next
late night show.
My next TikTok bet is
coming from the pool.
Is coming from the pool.
Yeah. All right, so you guys better go follow Eric on TikTok because you're gonna want to see that shit. So I do want to talk about the game here, but I have one interesting thing that I wanted to get your take on, Drew. We've seen an interesting coaching carousel come to a conclusion this week, and I don't know. Let me say this as someone that is going to bet a lot of season win totals. I think there are some choices that may point me in a direction one way or the other. What were your big takeaways from these, and are there opportunities that you think we can exploit when win totals come out?
Yeah, I mean, the most recent news and something I haven't had a chance to really react to until now, so this is cool. But the decision by the Houston Texans to hire Lovie Smith was a wild one. I thought they did a strange job last year at landing on David Culley, and for them to outdo themselves this year in terms of poor decision making is impressive.
Do you think it was like a decision because I feel like if you view the Houston Texans as like a mega church, then
is that how you view them, by the way?
It makes so much more sense. I'm not saying it makes sense. I'm saying it makes more sense. And do you think that this was was this a sin of commission, or did they just let the Spirit guide them? George, I feel like when we talked about this last year, it was sort of like they just let the whole offseason happen to them. And now this is why don't you just retain Culley?
I have a theory. Are you ready for my theory?
By all means, yes.
Okay. So last year, that team was in total disrepair, right? They have a mass exodus of all their talent. Deshaun Watson turns out to be a complete scumbag, and they're trying to ship him off, and the entire organization is a disaster. So the David Culley thing was going to be a year, and it didn't matter, right? It was this is a guy that we know we don't want to keep, point blank, okay? He ends up actually outperforming expectation. So they're kind of in a tough spot from a PR standpoint. But this year, I think there were two things at play. I think the first thing at play was the league was pissed at them for the way they handled it last year. And I think is pissed at them for some of the things they've done from a, improving equality among races standpoint. Okay, so both those things come into perspective. The Brian Flores thing then happens. And to me, there's one key here that I think makes some sense. I think there might be a little bit of them now that goes, you know what? Other teams are really interested in Deshaun Watson. The media's cooled on this a little bit. Do we think now that we could keep him if we bring in someone that he could respect and get along with? They decide it can't be Flores because they don't want to deal with that media shit show. And so they go, okay, what's the next best thing? And they just go, hey, Lovie Smith. They checked him with Deshaun Watson, and Deshaun was like, yeah, I love Lovie Smith, and they hired Lovie Smith.
Do you think that? Oh, go ahead.
I think there's a simpler explanation, which is that the decision makers there are not capable of running a hiring practice.
You think Caserio came from the Patriots? Do you think he's completely inept?
Wait, somebody from the Patriots not being able to
they hired Joe Judge back.
Walk on their own 2 feet?
The Patriots are doing what they do with players with coaches. It's like, yeah, he actually sucks alone, but in our environment, he's a star. We'll bring him back.
No, this is a lot more Occam's razor than it is. Okay. There's a layer of Deshaun Watson intrigue behind this, I think. And it's the simplest answer, which is maybe Caserio didn't even really have final say.
Yeah,
maybe Easterby was really the guy that is like like going back to the megachurch example, like he feels like he was guided in this direction,
right?
To bring Lovie Smith and elevate him within the program. Because let's not make a mistake here. Like Lovie Smith was completely out of his element head coaching the University of Illinois.
Right.
Yes. Like that was his last head coaching stop, and that was a disaster. And then to bring him in as a defensive coordinator under Culley was a head scratching move last year. And then now to elevate him to head coaches, it feels extremely temporary. I mean, we've seen.
Oh, so you think this is like another 1 year thing?
I would guess yes. And I mean, the people who are kind of in the know are like confused because they are like flirted so aggressively with Josh McCown, who's never had a coaching, who has no resume. And I think, maybe like maybe somebody at the NFL literally like caught word that a McCown deal was imminent and was like, no, like you can't do this. You have to, change course here. And they were like, okay, well, we'll just elevate somebody then and do this again next year after McCown's got a resume or something like that. I mean, like, that they are kind of somewhat stubborn in hiring Caserio in the first place. Like they wanted to do that for like 2 years.
Right.
And they kept getting blocked, and they ultimately are firing, going through guys. And Bill O'Brien got the role and responsibilities that he had to destroy the franchise in the first place because they couldn't get the guy they wanted from New England. So like they're, from the top down, ownership doesn't seem to have a very clear grasp of exactly how to run an NFL franchise, on top of the fact that the guy in his ear is a true ne'er-do-well. And then on top of all that, this whole hiring process was really, really fraught with mistakes. And I think the Texans are they weren't going to win next year anyway. It didn't matter who they hired, but this has kind of crystallized that.
Think about how awful they've handled this. Like you've done the tank. You have some of the best draft capital left, right? More or less. You have Laramie Tunsil, who somebody's going to trade a first-round pick for in all likelihood. You have Deshaun Watson, who either is going to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL or going to get you some draft capital. And no one with a pulse wanted that job. Like, how bad have you completely bungled this entire thing?
I'm really interested to see. I just view, looking at my crystal ball, next year.
Now we're back to the megachurch.
Yeah, exactly. Back to the megachurch. I mean, to your point, and I sent you this quote. I think it's from PFT wrote it, that Easterby and McNair prayed together.
Oh no.
Over some of the decisions they've made.
Which there's nothing wrong with that, other than using it as a crutch for making terrible decisions.
Right.
Look, it wasn't me.
Their God led them astray because guess what? Like Flores was the absolute right choice. Like if you look at what Flores did with the Miami Dolphins, they made some very questionable decisions in the draft, I think, in terms of the talent they acquired. And yet Flores developed those guys into decent playmakers this season. As the season went on, I think you saw over the last 7 weeks of the season, the last 7 weeks where they had that winning streak, they were playing awful competition, and that has to be weighed into the kind of the calculus for sure. But they had huge contributions from young linemen, specifically young defensive players who Flores developed, and they that's what you need if you are the Texans right now. You don't need someone who's going to bring in some offensive scheme that's going to blow away the league and shock and awe. You need someone who's going to develop young talent, because that is your only chance to kind of restock the cupboard with good players.
In fairness, Lovie Smith's offensive scheme could shock the world.
Yeah, I mean, think about this: the Dolphins, right? Just to put a bow on this, though, the Dolphins. Flores did a much better coaching job than Zach Taylor.
Oh,
if you change Burrow and Tua, their spots, the Dolphins might be playing this week.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And because the talent there is great. They built it up. They tore it down a little bit. They built it back up. The defense has good talent. They compete. They swept the New England Patriots this year. They were, and they had their issues, obviously, but most of it stemmed at the quarterback position. But down all the way down to just having terrible offensive lines. Those are the same team other than the quarterback. Yeah. And interestingly, if you look at it, one's a 9-8 team and one's a 10-6 team. They tanked the last week, but it's not that different. And Flores was sort of cast away like he's some schmuck. It made no sense.
Let's do this real quick because I'm curious. I want to know your favorite and least favorite other than the Texans, and kind of thinking about this from a win total perspective. Does your favorite move the needle in terms of your opinion versus the markets and vice versa? Drew, I'll start with you.
Okay. Favorite, I'm going to actually split this here and say that there were two very good hires, in my opinion, and it started at the GM and then the coach, and it was the Vikings and the Giants. And I will probably regret ever bringing this comparison up because it seems ludicrous right now. But if you squint hard enough and you have terrible eyesight, you can see some talent in Daniel Jones that could translate to a Josh Allen type of.
That would require you to have as many drinks as you and Eric.
Yes, exactly. 100%. This is influence. This is under the influence type of.
I wish I could remember that intercontinental rap. So I could say.
But yeah, so Daniel Jones, is he ever going to be? I mean, I had very low expectations for Josh Allen in the first place, surely, and I completely am willing to. Hold some probability that Daniel Jones is better than we have seen, because he has been under Jason Garrett now for 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. And he really hasn't ever had a coordinator or a visionary who can, utilize any of his skill set. And a lot of his skill set is similar to Josh Allen, just in terms of raw ability. So
the drinks are still live. Hair of the dog that bit you, I guess.
I think physically, I think running the ball, you're right.
Yeah,
I think
running the ball,
sure. Maybe not quite.
Oh my God, the drinks are still in his system too. Ty, were you out with these guys?
We're talking about you come into the Buffalo Bills season 2 years ago where people had high expectations for this team. They bring in Stephon Diggs. Dable kind of gets full control of what he wants that offense to be from a vision standpoint. Okay. And Josh Allen magically fixes his accuracy. Yeah. And that entire team took a wild leap step forward. And no one really saw it coming. Am I saying that there is a 50-50 chance that happens with the Giants? No chance. It's close to 50-50. But it's definitely bigger than 10%.
Okay.
And, and Dable, for what it's worth, seems to at least have gotten a ton of respect from the players in the locker room. You can see growth and learning in terms of the way that he's running his offense and sequencing and some schemes aspects. So I think particularly in a really weak NFC East generally, with draft capital, with someone from the Bills, kind of mindset who, can build a team in that way, offense first, get some skill position players. There is enough of a possibility that it could go positive that I think they're worth at least considering as far as an NFC wild card.
Mike Kafka, the OC, was Patrick Mahomes' quarterback coach from day one. Mahomes really likes him.
I've heard now we've got Daniel Jones is Josh Allen, and now he's going to turn into Patrick Mahomes.
The leaky part of this analysis is that a quarterback on his 4th year of his rookie deal is not as advantageous as we believe, right? Because the problem is if Daniel Jones has, let's say he has like I wouldn't even say Bortles plus. I think he's better than that. But like, let's say that the Giants go 10-7, win the East because everybody else is bad, and Daniel Jones put together a good season. You're kind of screwed if you're the Giants, because then you got to give him the 5th-year option, which is expensive, or you have to extend him, and like that. It's a tough. It's in that middle of the pack. That's why you don't draft a 1st-round quarterback to sit him for more than a year, because once you get to like this, once you push the starting line back, then it's not like it used to be. That 5th-year option is expensive for a 1st-year quarterback, and like especially for a top 10 pick, and you're still like there's such a false positive rate, right? Sure. We've had that so many times with guys like Baker Mayfield last year, for example.
What do you think Eric? What do you think the win total? Fair win total for them would be right now?
It's gonna be low.
It's 6.5.
I was gonna say 6.5. Would you go over?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
One real quick thing to add. I know that for sure I value player development more than a lot of other people who analyze the space.
Okay.
And so and some of that is because like a lot of the things that I've been surprised by have been like a player all of a sudden developing into like a real pro. Like, holy, how did this happen? Like, from an uncertainty standpoint, is there a path where Daniel Jones was stuck under someone who could not develop a quarterback and now is under someone who at least has done it once in his NFL career with, Dable and Allen? Like, it's not crazy.
And it's a good point, right? You're looking for things where the distribution is wider and you can get, a swat. I mean, even if you have a bigger chance of it going under, you'll take that, bigger chance of it potentially going way over, right? Because of that nuance. Eric, your favorite hire?
I've waffled back and forth on this, but I am going to go back to the
taste of Belgium. Okay.
Stop. I'm gonna go back to my discussion of the Bortles. I'm gonna go with Nathaniel Hackett in Denver. He gets a fair amount of like praise from everybody that's in that Green Bay locker room. I do think, again, like I'm a big time Matt LaFleur fan. Like I think Matt LaFleur adds value, but then you sort of see at the end of the season where maybe maybe it is less than what I think, because when Rodgers melts down, then that team loses in the playoffs, and now LaFleur 3 straight years of 13 wins, but not ever going the next step.
Right.
Hackett gets a lot of credit. I do think he should, because Rodgers was like teetering on like the precipice of not having that starting job anymore. And, he's made him an MVP for consecutive seasons. And, he's probably the reason, like, Rodgers is favored to go there. There's a humongous amount of talent on that team. And they can start over at quarterback, which I think is maybe a better thing than sort of like going in halfway. It's that one. I think Minnesota's also did a good job. I also agree with you that I think the Giants have done a good job.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll ask you the same question. What would you make the win total for the Broncos right now?
Ooh, man.
And this is a tough one because of the Rodgers thing.
It's a tough one because of the Rodgers thing, and it's a tough one because, as you guys know very well, like the AFC is utterly stacked. And that I believe the AFC West is going to have really, really tough schedules next year. I can't remember exactly who they line up against, but I remember thinking AFC North was going to have easy schedules. AFC West was going to have tough ones. The Broncos are going to be in the 8.5 ballpark. They're going to set it right around 500, and they're going to, if Rodgers goes, that'll be 10.5. And if it's
10.5.
And if it's not Rodgers, it'll go down to 6.5.
You think so?
Yeah.
They were 8.5 this year with Bridgewater.
Yeah. Can I say this?
We're sort of splitting the difference.
I would rather bet over 6.5 without Rodgers than over. And at 10.5, I'm not sure I agree with you. I think it might be more like 11.5.
No way.
With Rodgers.
With Rodgers, and here's why. Because I think if he gets Rodgers, I think they're bringing Adams too.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah. I want the Chiefs to sign Adams.
Well, of course you do. Hey,
No,
I don't know if you guys know this. I don't know if you know this, Drew, but the Rams and the Bengals are playing the Super Bowl for most of us here. For Eric, this is actually just Chiefs Media Center.
I just did it.
So my favorite is Hackett as well, and all the reasons that Eric just cited. But you don't, with a lot of these coaches, especially ones that are assistant coaches, you just don't know from a leadership standpoint. You don't know what the kind of buy-in is from the players. And say what you want to say about Aaron Rodgers, but like if that guy goes to bat for an offensive coordinator, that he's had for 2 years, like that should say something about that guy's disposition. I'm also this guy. So you value player development.
Sure.
I watch the press conferences and I go like, okay, what am I gleaning? Nathaniel Hackett gets it from a human standpoint. And as a head coach, that fucking matters, like really matters. So I think I will end up again this year betting the over on the Broncos for that reason.
So here's the question I have, because let's circle around this because this is a betting show. What Aaron Rodgers to Denver, Carr stays in Las Vegas, Mahomes and Herbert.
Yep.
What are the odds? What would you put the percentages for the AFC West?
Okay. You're going to get KC plus 125. You're going to have LA. You're going to have Broncos like plus 180, plus 200-ish.
Mm-hmm.
LA is going to be in like the plus 360, plus 400 range. And the Raiders are going to be about
Like
plus
9 to 1.
8,
Yeah.
8 to 9. Yeah, maybe 10 to 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So-
what's my hold there?
It's
Yeah,
not
I'm
bad.
curious.
It's
I
not
actually
bad.
think it's pretty good.
I have to. I'll calculate it right here. But like it's so funny to me because I've been somebody who's just like I've been somebody who's like found great joy in the Chargers just melting down all the time. But this would be another example of like the Chargers just like the universe just like frowning at them,
Yes.
right? Because now they're like plus 360 in a division, and you can make a case that they have the division's best quarterback. You could,
Yeah.
like I'm not going to agree with it, but you could. Herbert's that talented.
Also, I'll say this: if those are the odds you're putting, and I'm not going to do the math in my head, but I think the most appetizing one to me there is the Chargers. Now, I'm saying that along with like probably every human on earth because like everyone just loves to bet the Chargers. To quote Eric, it's the hipster pick every single year. But I think it's
I like
good.
the Chargers before everybody else did.
But if you think about the narratives around like continuity and stuff, like the interesting thing is that the Chargers may have the most continuity from a team perspective in that division. Thinking about their coaches, thinking about their weapons, where you could have in Kansas City, for example, you have Kafka leaving. Who the hell knows what's happening with like Hill? Are they bringing in another wide receiver? You go look at the Broncos, obviously a ton of turnover there, and like you have a new coach. So I think that is interesting.
we have to give Drew a lot of love here because he has 19% hold on that
Oh
market.
wow!
It's not
Well
bad for
done.
a futures market.
Well done.
We'll
It's not a bad hold for a futures market.
Okay, let's
We'll circa it and we'll rein in a couple of these here and get you down to like 10%.
I will say this: you guys both mentioned Minnesota.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to end up betting the over on Minnesota too.
Over on them. Okay, yeah, that's the easier case for me to make for a win total over because obviously I shouldn't say obviously, but you at least have more a better understanding or implied stability at the quarterback position, which matters a ton. Like,
well, that's where I have a question because what would you put the odds that they continue with Cousins?
Yeah.
And B, because I have a theory about the Cousins thing, as George knows.
Yeah.
Keep Cousins or not keep Cousins, and then win total with or without Cousins. Because obviously, I don't know if there's a path for them to do like worse than Cousins, but still have a franchise-ish quarterback. Like they're not going in because they don't have the cap. Like if they get rid of Cousins, it's a draft and develop situation and tank situation, and so it is very much like it's not like think about Tampa Bay where they're like Brady I think Tampa's actually going to get a real quarterback this year. I don't think the Vikings get a real quarterback if they get rid of Cousins.
No, I would agree with that 100%. And
you think they're keeping him?
I think they're keeping him.
Same.
And this is not an informed take. Like I don't know anyone in the Vikings, and I don't really have a good sense of like what their long-term vision is. But a 4-year contract doesn't really give you a lot of latitude.
Talking about Kwesi's contract, yeah.
4-year contract. I thought that was a brilliant hire. I'm very excited to see what he does with that role, in that role. But 4-year puts him under a little bit of a gun to show improvement quickly. And I think if you are him sitting down and reviewing what happened, autopsy of the 2021 season, you probably walk away from that thinking like, man, they were actually kind of close.
And their quarterback play was good. Like the strength of their team was the fact that Cousins could throw the ball to Justin Jefferson.
Right. You come away with the autopsy and you say like 3 things. We have a bona fide superstar in Justin Jefferson.
Yep.
Kirk Cousins can do what we need him to do to win games if we upgrade the system. And I think you look at a lot of those games where the margins were narrow and you're like, man, if you just bring in somebody who has a plus EV vision from in-game decision making, scheme, like just philosophy, that alone could have accounted for a bunch of coin flips that went against them. And I mean, did they lose their first 3 games and all 3 of them were like imminently winnable?
Yep.
Surely Cook didn't fumble. I didn't think.
And then they had a missed 37-yarder against Arizona.
They missed the field goal.
Then they had a 1-score loss in Week 4 against Cleveland. I mean, every game that they had was 1 score this year, except for Seattle in Week 3, Packers when they started Mannion, and then actually their final game was they won by 2 scores. Every other game was 1 score, but they were kind of 500 in the 1-score game. Cousins had games. Like they had the Detroit game where they gave up the lead, and then Cousins came back and got them in position for a field goal. So they won a lot of close games, and they lost a lot of close games. And I do agree with you in the sense of, this is silly, but you have to play football and entice variance when you're the better team in some side. In that way, you want to play multiple score games when you're the good team, right? And I do feel like the Vikings had the quarterback advantage in a lot of games, and decided just to play the very nature of their games, played them close, and that's how you lose to Cooper Rush. It wasn't Cousins' fault that they lost to Cooper Rush. It was their way to. It was how they play football, and then variance, right? And that was the story. So I agree. If they have a plus EV approach to football, they might get out. You're right. They might get out of that basin and win. Let's say they win 11 games and 8 of them are by more than 1 score. That's how the Chiefs did it with Alex Smith. Alex Smith is no better than Cousins, and he's no better at the end of the game. And Andy Reid's a donkey at the end of games. But they had something like a 70% record in the Alex Smith era in multiple score games. That's how you do it. You leave less to chance. But my theory is with 4 years on Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell's contract, they have to extend Cousins. They can't go with him with 45 mil. And so you're basically making a bet if you're Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell that of my 4 years, 3 of them are Cousins. And I wonder that's my negative side of this whole thing and saying
I agree, but here's the interesting thing, and this is how I'll turn it into the Super Bowl here. Because Kevin O'Connell is the offensive coordinator in the Super Bowl. What the Rams are doing right now, which is going to the Super Bowl, is in many people's mind going to ratify their strategy as being a solid strategy to employ going forward.
This is a great topic, by the way.
Now, if I'm Kevin O'Connell and I'm Kwesi, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to look at Kirk Cousins and go, wait, was Kirk Cousins any worse than Matt Stafford was in Detroit? And I think the answer is no.
No.
And you go, okay, well, Kevin O'Connell, what is it that you know how to do? And you look at the Rams and you go, oh, it's create wide open spaces for a guy that can line up in the slot or out wide. Yeah. Would you rather have Justin Jefferson or Cooper Kupp? I love Cooper Kupp. I'm taking Justin Jefferson. Yeah. That guy is a special talent. You look at the players there, they don't have the same superstars that LA has. They don't have Donald, they don't have Ramsey, but they're not bereft of really good players either. And so with Rodgers potentially going out of the division, I am leaning towards that is the tack that they're taking. And if you're looking at the Rams going to the Super Bowl in a year where shit hit the fan from an overall NFL perspective, and maybe to Eric's point, that was the best read on the Rams part. Why not Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings, Kirk Cousins, and Kwesi? Because the path, and to your point, in 4 years to success, if you go, hey, You have 4 years. Would you rather start it off knowing you have Cousins for 3 or taking a complete crapshoot in a quarterback draft that isn't great?
Yeah, I have 2 quick things to add to that because I completely agree with you. The fact that this year's quarterback class is awful matters. I think the fact that it's so bad that, and there are 12 teams in the NFL that would all like to upgrade their quarterback, which means that Cousins, even with his gross contract, is an asset, right? You are potentially taking calls from teams.
If you trade him, you'll get something.
He's an asset, and so I also think that if you had told me that Jared Goff was tradable, considering what he was signed for,
yep,
I would have laughed in your face.
Yeah.
It's there is no way. And so if you do a deal, if you extend Cousins, and if you I think you can make it team friendly enough that even if this year turns out to be we're never going to get there with Cousins, I think he's still an asset next offseason, and you could potentially either do what the Rams did and try to flip him and upgrade in some way by giving up future assets, or you dump everything next offseason and you try to reload and move up in the draft, and you take one of the good guys that's coming out next year, because next year's quarterback class is quite good.
What about a this just popped in my head. What about a Cousins Russell Wilson deal? Is that
I don't mind. So
is that to be had somewhere?
Yeah, I don't. My issue is so the Rams are there's 13 players on both of these teams that have more than 0.28 WAR, right? So a very good starter, right? And Xavier Woods is one of them. Actually, he's a free agent, and they don't have money. And after that, it's Harrison Smith, who's older, Justin Jefferson, and Kirk Cousins. Every other player is a Ram.
But that's because that's because Danielle Hunter was hurt.
Danielle Hunter, yeah. But and
Adam
Eric
Thielen was hurt.
Eric Kendricks had a declining year. The corner position's rough. I mean, and again, this is one of those where. This is where I take a step back, and I was skeptical of the Rams, but I'll give them a ton of credit. The Rams have found players in the draft, and they've developed them. Jordan Fuller's a player.
Yep.
Was it Gaines? Gaines or nose tackle's a player.
Yeah. Darius Williams, the other cover corner.
Yeah. The Vikings.
He's going to get exposed against T. Higgins, but
the Vikings had Jefferson, which is wonderful. Cam Dantzler's okay. Jeff Gladney's their first round pick 2 years ago. He's gone.
Yeah, they glaringly do not have Jalen Ramsey on their team. I will give them that.
Or the assets. I think
they also play in a dramatically worse division.
True.
I will say.
I mean that's what makes it hard, right? Because if they were in the AFC West, this decision is trivial, is it not? Because in the AFC West, Cousins cannot compete, and you are a ways away. Yeah. To me, I actually don't mind the decision just to play out Cousins' contract. The only issue is you don't get any assets from him. And I do think if you extend him, the problem is Cousins has been the best finesser in that's where he's first team all finesse, right? Where you are not getting a great deal with Cousins. The catch-22
first team all finesse. Who else is on that team?
Bradford and other Vikings quarterback. The problem with Cousins is, and this is what makes it so hard for Minnesota, is he actually has played above expectations since they signed him, I think, right? The decision to sign him was made that much more bad because he exceeded expectations, but the team around him predictably crumbled. And so if you go to him and say, look, Kirk, we're gonna ask you to take less, what is he going to say? He's like, look, I've just had 3 straight good years. What do you? So you're not even coming.
You might have to pray with him a little bit.
Yeah, you could go to Houston. You're not going that much further down from 45. You're maybe getting down to 35. There's not a ton of relief that you.
I mean, I think that you sit him down in a room and you go, look, you've had this good of a set of years, and look at our record. Why is that? And you go, okay, well, we don't have the other players on the team. You go, okay, well, here's how we can do that. Do you want to be the guy that puts up stats and is Eric Eager's first team all finesse, or do you want to try and win some football games? And you might, from a guy that's already made a crap ton of money and presumably all he spends it on are steaks that he overcooks, would he just be like, yeah, I'm in to try and make this the real thing? Because to the point, and I think that the talk all off season, and if the Bengals win, it might be different. But the Rams win and they're favored, it's going to be do teams try and repeat and do what the Rams have
there
done?
Are three. If the Rams win, there are 3 quarterbacks in the history of the NFL that have won a Super Bowl with a team in their first year on the team. So no rookies have ever done it. The one is one is Trent Dilfer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure.
The other one is Tom Brady. Next one is Matthew Stafford. Like, you are like, it's sort of why.
And then Kirk Cousins. What a list that's going to be.
Like, to me, it's one of those where the PF, like, what we've preached, right, which is like basically do what the Bengals do: tank, draft a quarterback high, build your secondary really flat, get a pass rusher. Like, that's the way. Like, the Rams are sort of spit in that thing's face, and like they might win. They're probably going to win the Super Bowl. Like, Drew wants them to, of course. And
the Rams' journey I've been on this season has been a roller coaster because I was so out on the Rams in August. Like, but like the reason, and again, like I like the Bucks, I like the Browns, and a lot of the reason I like those teams in the preseason was because they had like they looked resilient to injuries, and I was like, man, these teams are so talented and so deep. Like, even if things go sideways, like they still have guys who can step up and make and fill the gaps. And I was like, in the Rams, like, this is stars and scrubs. Like, one thing goes wrong, and like it's all lost.
It turns out
nothing went wrong.
It turns out they're very resilient to injuries.
Turns out they're very. Turns out everyone's healthy, even except for the kicker. Apparently.
So does that? And this is because I think this is a really interesting question. Like, is it okay to say their strategy was sound, or that they got a little lucky and like don't try this at home kind of thing?
Well, I think so. The question is if more teams do this, are we going to have fewer great teams? Because I think that's the point. Like, they this year stood out because they took advantage of a league where it's also, we talked about this a number of times. I want to get Drew's opinion on this. Brady had 16-game schedules, 2-game playoffs. He got the bye every year.
Sure.
Now it's 17 games, and because there's only one bye, you're grinding it out to week 18 in most cases. Like, the Tennessee Titans were grinding out against Houston just to keep the Chiefs from having that one bye. Yeah. You'd be less likely to now, and it's my theory that's why Brady retired, which is like, I used to just have to play 18 games to get the Super Bowl. Now it's 20. Like, forget this nonsense. I'm out. Would going all in and like just praying for health, because that's ultimately how the Rams outlasted Tampa. They were healthier and ultimately better. And that's why, San Francisco the same way. San Francisco banged up in that game.
Yeah. I think we're coming back to like a stupid cliche, which is super correct, which is it always takes luck to get to this point. And I think for sure the Rams, even at full strength, effectively, getting the best you could have hoped out of Stafford, effectively. They still needed the Niners to beat the Cowboys. Well, you actually go back to week 18. They needed the Seahawks to beat the Cardinals to give them a home.
They needed Detroit to beat the Cardinals.
They needed Detroit to beat the like so many things had to break right for them to win to be the 4 seed. And even then, like, I always thought they were a very good matchup for Tampa Bay because of sort of strengths versus weaknesses, and I think that bared out. I feel like if the Cowboys beat the Niners and you send Stafford and company to Green Bay, like, I don't know that team is tough enough to get a win the way that the Niners did in that spot. And the Niners limped their way into SoFi, 7th road game in 9, and like even then it took a pretty miraculous comeback for them to get here. So it's like there will be people who talk themselves into this approach because it may ultimately succeed for the Rams this year, and completely ignore the fact that it was like a wild streak of luck that got them to this point. And like, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves and say that they beat the Bengals, but like, are people going to put an asterisk on that and be like, "Well, you beat Joe Burrow in his first ever Super Bowl with an O-line that had no interior pass protection"?
I don't think anybody.
No one's going to do that.
No one's going to do that.
Nor should they.
But let me ask you this: if they lose,
it's Chris was saying this on the show. We were on the podcast with Chris, and he goes, because I asked him, because it's actually a good question, because Marino in the '80s, right? Oh, he's getting back there. Well, your guy Montana was just like, nope. And then it was Manning, and that Brady's like, Nope.
Yeah.
And you have all these sort of like, you know, these transcendent guys who sort of snipe away Super Bowls. And the same thing with Mahomes. Like, Mahomes has got the one. Who knows if he's ever going to get back? You know, you have and so for Burrow, it's like everybody's like, oh, they got $58 million in cap space.
Yeah.
He's great. This is a great team. They can patch it up. It's like, your coach is Zach Taylor.
Yeah.
Like, you got to chill out. You probably want to win this one. But at the same time,
If you think that this very well could be Joe Burrow's only Super Bowl,
yes, thank you.
The AFC is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason with the Rams. If the Rams were in the AFC and they lost this, I'd be like,
That's it.
That's a great point.
you want to this was the strategy that you want to take because like you got there and you still couldn't win and now you're in hell. The difference is that who the hell is left in the NFC?
And see, this is where is it too late now to say sorry to the Rams again by me? Because not only did they finesse this year, it's like there's no good teams in the NFL, but now you look in the future, there's no good teams in the conference. Like what? And that might be them like galaxy braining everybody and somehow lucking into this situation where they're carrying a huge pot of. But yeah, to me they have like it's.
They got to win
If
this
they
game.
lose, it's going to be hard, man.
They
like,
got to win this game.
Yeah.
So let's transition to this game a little bit because it's really interesting, right? Cincinnati's already won. Their season is a success already. For the Rams, it is not. In fact, it could be deemed like, oh my God, you lost to a team that was picked last in their division at home, right? Like,
sure.
Are you serious? And to your point, like all of a sudden, then people will say, wow, they got lucky, getting here, getting there, like all those things. Is that a part of your handicap, Drew? Looking at the spread, 4.5 right now, the way the teams have played mathematically versus on the scoreboard necessarily at the end of the game. How are you handicapping it? What are some of the keys to like why you're on one side or the other?
Yeah, so I have, full disclosure, I have like a lot of reasons to cheer for the Rams to win this game and not a lot to cheer for them to win by more than 4.5.
Recap that.
Like I really
Regale us.
I
Read
really
us the
don't
menu here.
Drew is in the Bet the Process Calcutta, which has a pretty big pot if the Rams win.
And
going to you.
For the first off, Calcuttas are fucking awesome.
Yes.
Tell the people how it works.
It's more common among college basketball for March Madness. First of all,
it's incredible.
Rufus and Jeff started doing this last year for the NFL, for golf majors, for college basketball, and it's extremely fun. You effectively put together what you believe to be a fair price on a given team in terms of percent of what will be the future pot, and the pot is determined not by the players a priori. You bid on each team. And effectively, like the pot is a dynamic growth as you go through the auction, right?
Yeah. It's the total amount of dollars auctioned.
Right, and there's two strategies. Effectively, almost if you're playing with friends, you almost certainly you bid early. You want an early team because as you get deeper into the Calcutta, everybody has a reasonable expectation what the pot is, and they are going to make sure that there's not a plus EV bet made. Mm-hmm. So you're almost everybody that takes a second half of the pot, the Calcutta team is paying the tax. Like they're putting more up than they're actually worth. Yeah, right. And so you're just you're defending your position. You're trying to juice the pot after you've kind of staked your territory, and ended up with the Rams.
And were they your first?
That was my I went in. So okay, we have you get 3.5% of the pot for the first round win. You get 6.5% for the second round win, 10% for a championship win, 13% for the Super Bowl. And the rest of the pot is split up into these side pots for accomplishing other things, right?
Which is one of the best parts of the Calcutta.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
in college basketball, it's like, who gets blown out the most gets a certain amount. So
you need some incentive for somebody to walk up there and be
Gardner Webb.
I'm bidding on the 16 seed Gardner Webb. Let's go. Let's get these guys.
They suck.
Putting together the side pots is a lot of fun. And I went into the Calcutta with a expectation that the Rams had a decent chance at scooping a bunch of those because they're a little bit of a weird team in terms of the turnovers, in terms of like blowouts and losses, et cetera. So I kind of thought they had a decent chance at scooping a bunch of those pots. So my expectation was higher than everybody else's in the group, and I ended up with them, even though like I've been noted Rams hater for every week of the season leading up to that that moment.
Eric, the president of the Finesse Club and the Rams haters.
Yes,
Rams splainers.
Yeah. So I went from Ramsplaining to Ramley in the matter of a moment. Wow. And it was very lucky, honestly.
You're rambunctious about the team.
Okay, so with that in mind,
are
you feeling good about your position?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I have basically 65% expectation of 13% of the pot, which is something like mid 5 figures.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm very, I can take it off the table at this point and walk away. I'm already well in the black for the whole experience.
And so are you actively hedging with some Bengals?
I haven't yet, and I've been trying. We talked a lot about like how to go about that last night. Like, what's the right avenue to do that? And realistically, the Burrow MVP, I think we kind of settled on like that's the right angle of attack because
more so than
the spread because number one, I don't think the spread is plus EV. I don't think taking 4.5 is getting you that much expected value. And in fact, if you look at sort of the way the game state can play out, I see long tail Rams blowout.
Oh yeah.
More so than I see.
So the middle is not attractive to you.
The middle is not really attractive to me. It's more of just like cover bases here.
Do you think that's true about NFL games in general now too? Like, was that your tweet? Like, I think it was Adam Chernoff who basically was saying like, this whole trope about, and we were dunking on those people last year who said, okay, I'm going to bet Bucks money line and then Kansas City -3 because whoever wins the game is going to cover the spread anyway. Yeah. And it was just like, well, actually, like it's perfectly priced here.
Yeah.
But there were also the money line.
Those people are no longer alive to speak about it, actually.
The money line in playoff games, though, is differently correlated with the spread, right? Because of how these games play out. And this is the lowest total in a Super Bowl since Philly versus New England was also 48.5. It's the lowest total in a while. But even then, a 48.5 total in the NFL, especially this year, pretty high. And like that means the points are worth less. And like I think to your point, like the long tail, I do think it's one of those things where if the Rams win, it's going to be definitive. I think.
And Burrow MVP is he 5-2? What is it?
It's plus 225.
Plus 225. Okay.
But you're and there is less of a chance that Burrow doesn't win MVP than Stafford doesn't win MVP, right. And I don't think it's close.
Especially because Burrow's got what he will do, what he enters the game with is this belief that he does the things to win. So, like, even if his stats are ugly, right, he is going to do the things to win the game for them, right, in a gritty fashion. Sure. And to your point, we were talking about before the podcast, number of people here that can name a non-Joe Burrow Bengals player, like, even as good as Jamar Chase is, it's not that many people. And, like, once you get past Jamar Chase, it's, like, zero. So I think that's interesting. And we were talking about some of the MVP bets as well, like instead of betting, a money line. And so take us through the Rams side of that. Like, as you think about, okay, I have this conviction around the Rams, and say 4.5 being, not something that you think is valuable there. Like, how would you think about the MVP?
Yeah. So again, kind of like the basic handicap of this game to me, and I think a lot of people will look at the obvious, which is, oh my God, this defensive line is so good, and the offensive line for the Bengals is garbage. Like, Burrow's going to get sacked a dozen times, and Aaron Donald could win MVP, and I'm going to go, run and bet that. I think that price for Aaron Donald MVP is ludicrous. It's stupid. And there's the idea that the third most likely player for the Rams to win this MVP is Donald is crazy to me.
Really?
Crazy to me.
Yeah.
And
who do you think it should be?
Probably Akers, maybe. I mean, it's,
really?
Yeah, probably.
Akers looks like
how many sacks does Donald need to win MVP? Is I think the good question, right?
Three,
and he's only had we talked about last night.
Okay,
he hasn't had 2 or more in a game. He's had 2 or more in a game once.
3 if it's only sacks.
Yeah,
but a sack fumble
Well, that was what Von Miller had in the.
Now let me just say this: Aaron Donald is the best. What did you say? Best player in the NFL.
Yes,
okay. But he's clearly the best defensive lineman, best pass rusher out there.
Yes,
he is facing perhaps the worst pass protecting set of guards, and in Hakeem Adeniji space, the 81st of 82 graded guards on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
So like, I mean,
there's like an approach though in general. I mean, it's got to matter, and I think it changes the way that the Bengals probably come up with their game plan. Obviously, like
when have the Bengals had a game plan? This is exciting. Is this gonna happen?
I mean, I looked at they beat the Titans somehow, some way, conceding 9 sacks.
Yeah, exactly.
And
the game plan was Joe, please God help us.
Yeah, Joe, do anything at all. Kicker, make your field goals that are very difficult. And oh, by the way, we need the opposing quarterback to give us 3 gifts.
Yeah. I mean, that was the best thing that Joseph has overcome since the Immaculate Conception.
It was a very impressive win by him, and on the road as well against the 1 seed.
I feel like the world is going to give this Joseph a lot more credit than the last one.
You think so?
That's a fair point.
I mean, he deserves it.
That's a fair point. But no, like fundamentally, the likelihood that the Bengals run, get the ball out of his hand a little bit quicker, more screens. They're going to do their sort of standard waist downs with mixing into a cloud of dust type of stuff anyway. But like, there's a little bit of a blueprint around the league about how you deal with Donald. Like, you put 3 hats on him, right? And like, that gives up space to other guys to do things. And the Rams have been making that
So
work
do you like Von Miller as like a long shot then?
That's not crazy. Yeah. But ultimately, like, the Rams winning this game defensively, I have a tough time seeing that. The way that the machinations aren't there. The defensive player wins this award when you have like a clear, everybody's expectations coming into the game is this defense is incredible.
Yeah.
But they're going up against a really, really good offense. Good luck to them.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, they won with defense. Yeah. Well, now I have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, little Raiders Bucks from days of old.
The one that it reminds me of is when Ray Lewis won the MVP. When Ray Lewis, like, that was the one where everybody went into the game expecting the defense, and then it came to fruition completely. Whereas what you're describing is everybody coming into this game believing Donald is the man. I don't know if he's going to be able to he's not going to meet expectations.
Okay, let me push back on this a little bit. So I have more faith in the Rams scheming Donald pass rushes than I do Zach Taylor scheming a way to stop Donald. In other words, I expect Aaron Donald, and let me back this up a little bit. Okay, there is a vibe with Aaron Donald that is important here. There's a history that's important. This guy has been the best player in the league on a shitty-ass team here for a long time. He is the Rams, okay? And I think there is going to be special effort made where he has put up with triple teams over and over and over again. No one works harder than Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
He is going to be rushing off the edge. They are going to give him stunts. They are going to line him up at linebacker and blitz him through the A-gap. Like, they are going to do stuff with Aaron Donald in this game in a much more creative way, in my opinion, than I would expect Zach Taylor to look to counterbalance that.
I mean, I hope you're right.
And then when that happens, it's like the Stafford thing, where this story is great. Like, Chris and Al are going to talk about Aaron Donald and how incredible it is that he is leading this team to the Super Bowl now. Yeah. I know I'm making the kind of a crazy, but I think it's as strong as the Matt Stafford finally is winning after, being destitute in Detroit. Like, the Aaron Donald narrative is a strong one.
Okay, so that's all that is fair. I still worry a little bit that he has kind of settled too much into his role at times of, I'll just be the guy that eats 3 blockers and you guys get the glory. Like, he's selfless in that way in a lot of respects. And I won't be blown away if we look up in the fourth quarter and it's kind of a lot like the Niners game and you're just like, man, where's Donald been? Like he just, like he's doing something on every down that's super important for the team overall, but you don't necessarily notice it. And again, like we lived through a Rams-Patriots Super Bowl that had some of the worst offensive performances we've ever seen in a Super Bowl.
True.
And yet it still went to an offensive player because he accumulated enough stats. And I feel like even in a game where the Rams defense holds the Bengals to 3 points, Aaron Donald gets a couple sacks. Overall, the defense has 9 sacks. But Cooper Kupp still has 10 receptions for 140 yards. He's probably getting it over Donald. And maybe even Stafford gets consideration outside of the fact that he probably will have turnovers in this game, considering the style of defense he's going up against.
This player in the NFL named Aaron being selfless. First time for everything. Okay, let's close out with some props. Eric, as I mentioned, has been on TikTok delivering the goods for the 12-year-olds out there. Although what's interesting about TikTok is that the age distribution, although it's funny and cliche to say it's a bunch of 8-year-old girls betting Super Bowl props, it's actually a lot of older people on TikTok.
A bunch of thirsty dudes.
Exactly. So, oh God! Speaking of thirsty dudes, you two at the bar last night would qualify as that. So let's talk some player props here. Drew, where is your head at as far as player props?
Okay, so I will caveat a lot of this with if you don't do it during the regular season, like why are you doing it now for a lot of this stuff? I feel like if you're not actively handicapping player props for, just grinding it out through the regular season, and you're now just kind of dusting off like, hey, I had built this model for projecting this thing for last year's Super Bowl. Let's tune it up and try it for this year. Like you're already at a disadvantage to a degree. So for that reason, I tend to take it a little easier on player props because I respect that there are market makers who have a much stronger opinion and better tools, better infrastructure than I do. And I guess the other thing I would kind of mention, surely there still are ways to attack this. Even though like I do feel like this year the prop market has been tighter than normal. There used to be free stuff like 5 years ago where like a guy who was like boomer bust like Tyler Boyd, right? Boyd is kind of feast or famine in terms of statistical performance, right? And so you look at like his average receiving yards and it's like 55 a game or something, right? But then his total is like under 40 for this game. And that's correct because it should be skewed low because he has plenty of games where he's just not showing up on the stat sheet.
It's not symmetric.
It's not symmetric, right? It's a bias. You want to be centered on the median, not the mean. Back in the day, there used to be lots and lots of stuff where it was mean. And you could just blindly just grab unders on boomer, feast or famine guys. And it hasn't been like that this year at all. I do think there are ways to attack the player prop market where you're getting a more resilient angle of attack. Like you're not betting something that depends on the game happening a certain way. That's almost certainly like where a lot of people do go about creating player prop positions. And it's wildly like minus EV to be like, well, I think this will happen, therefore this is a good prop. Like that type of stuff is like, that's easy to get you in trouble. I think
you might as well just bet a significant amount on the side.
Yeah, well, if you like that, if you think that's going to happen, then bet that. Right?
We were talking about this last night. It's like, people, I said this on the podcast Sunday. It's like people are like, oh, you don't bet that much on the Pro Bowl. It's like, well, you shouldn't bet that much on the side of the Super Bowl either because you have no edge at this point in the game. But it makes, and that's why, we built a props tool at PFF and we want people to be thinking about these things because again, like you said, the market's getting sharper and and your intuition has to be on before you get into this stuff because as you said, like there's so many like innumerate tricks that are being played on sort of the innumerate thinking about this game. But I love the point that you just made. I want you to like elaborate on it a little bit, which is if all your bets are correlated, i.e. you have no outs, right? Like then it's like, the game could snowball for you.
If all your bets are correlated and you're not betting it in a parlay where like the fair value of that bet, then you're in a world of hurt.
I think so there are certain ways though that are resilient. I don't see a ton of them this year. Like for sure last year, and this ended up being a very lucky win. I will completely admit that, because something happened at the end of last year's Super Bowl that you may remember or may not, because it was completely out of, it didn't matter. It ended up not mattering except for this prop. But the Chiefs, by the end of this season last year, when it was, business, the playoffs, tough competition, they had completely abandoned the run. Did not matter if they were trying to put away a lead or coming from behind. Like, Mahomes was passing on like an absolute absurd number of downs. And so his pass attempts prop was resilient, because it was like, well, if the Chiefs have a lead in this game, he's going to pass to put it away. If the Chiefs are coming from behind, he's going to be just dropping back on every single snap. And so his pass attempts prop was kind of near his season average, median. It was all kind of clustered. And I was like, you know what? Like, there's enough paths to this being a winner that like will get his attempts over. And he threw what I thought was a pick at the end of that game, and they didn't review it. And that ended up giving him 3 more attempts on that drive, and it got him over. Yeah. So it was a very lucky win ultimately. But like, I think you need to think of that type of an angle where it's like, okay, Bengals, like a good example, like the Bengals. And I'm against a couple of very sharp prop players on this one particularly, but like the Bengals in doing well, like against an aggressive pass rush, are going to have to, in my opinion at least, they're going to have to construct some sort of screen game, and they're going to utilize. And if you look at sort of how Joe Mixon has been utilized over the balance of the season, he was getting like 1 or 2 targets through like first 12 weeks, and then since like they really got into the business part of the season, all of a sudden he's getting like 4 to 8 targets a game. And specifically, you go back to that Titans game and the adjustments that Zach made in that one, if he did make an adjustment, or if Joe Burrow did it himself, who knows, but they targeted Mixon an absurd number of times. Like, he got like 7 targets, ended up with 6 catches. And so I think realistically expecting him to be a meaningful part of the receiving game or the passing game is fair. And that again kind of goes to, well, what if like the offensive line is completely falling apart? Like, the screen game makes sense. Like, what if the offensive line is doing well, and like how do they go about running their offense in general? And Mixon's going to be on the field for a lot of those those meaningful downs. And so I think his receiving props, receptions, yards, and then overall rushing plus receiving is a reasonable fair play, but I haven't done much else.
Yeah, that one's interesting, because they really do go with Samaje Perine in the sort of third down behind role, and so that that's sort of like a hedge against the Rams blowing them out, basically, right? Because but you are right. The interesting thing I'm thinking about is the carry props, especially for Mixon. It's like 16.5 or something, and I personally believe the first team to 10 designed runs loses this game. Like, and if you're rooting for the Rams or for the Bengals, and you see Akers or Mixon with the ball in 1st and 10, it's a sigh of relief, right?
Can I just say that I love Akers unders?
Yeah.
Everything that we've seen, it's so the impressiveness of him coming back from an Achilles injury and the impressiveness of his play are different. His play has not been impressive. It is impressive that he is playing, period.
The market's moved away from us. I will say us, because that was a bet. That was probably the first prop bet I made. The market has moved away from us on that one. It opened in the Superbook at 68.5. It's 63.5 on DraftKings had him at 62.5. It's not 63.5. For whatever that's worth, a yard's not worth that much, but it's moved away. And I think the reason is like the Rams will commit to the run. Like, we know this. Both teams are terrible running the ball, and both teams commit to it. And I have no idea why.
Sony season.
But the Bengals against the run on defense early downs are 26th in EPA allowed. The tricky thing is they're still giving up negative 0.07 EPA on early down runs. So like, that to me is the leak. In like, I can see the Bengals being successful, even though Sony Michel or Cam Akers has a good game, because they're sort of like enticing them every time. Like, look, I have a mad respect for Stafford at this point. When you take the ball out of his hands or Cooper Kupp, if you take the ball out of their hands, I'm nervous. Like, it's strange, but I do think Akers is going to get a lot of carries.
Can we talk about a prop that really matters?
Okay.
You know what this is. The only prop that really matters
The anthem.
is the anthem. The Anthem Syndicate.
Let me see
is
if I
here.
got. Let me see if I got the inside information.
Live in person. So, can we get a line check here?
I think it's 95 still. But
It's still
juicy-
95,
Super
okay.
juicy to the over.
So 95, and this is interesting. So last year, everyone thought it was going to go under. It was set at what was like a minute 57 seconds, ended up being like 2:13. All it took was a little bit of Googling to figure out that was a fucking lock of the century, okay? I've done some analysis.
Okay.
So Mickey Guyton, do you know anything about her?
It's 100 seconds on Bet Online.
Oh.
Over is minus 130.
Oh, buddy. Okay. All right. Let me talk you through this. You know who Mickey Guyton is?
Country music singer.
Country music singer, exactly. Previous country music female singers to sing the national anthem: Kelly Clarkson, Carrie Underwood. Kelly Clarkson came in at 134.
Wow.
Okay. Carrie Underwood, 143. Mickey Guyton sang the national anthem earlier this year. Do you want to gander a guess at what she rang in at?
Ooh. I saw one that was like the Capitol performance. Is that the one you were referring to?
Yes.
It was low.
Very low.
Like surprisingly. Yeah.
Very low. 86 seconds.
That's wild.
Now, I watched this with a cunning eye.
Sure.
Did not appear. Now, she sang out the notes on the end. That's obviously one thing you look for. Are they going to try and drag that out? She did that in this one. Okay.
And still 86.
And still 86. Now, I think there's a few things. People looking at last year going, oh, the over went way over. People are going to bet the over. There was a reason. It was two people.
Yep. 100% agreed.
Okay. Idiots. And there's a history here of, if you look at the distribution of anthem lengths, female country music singers are by far the quickest of any of that group.
Okay.
That is my analysis. I'm curious if you have anything to add.
I saw the same performance you saw, and I came to the same conclusions, which were, I don't understand why there's oversteam. I didn't see anything in that
Will
performance.
we be
that I was
buying a
like,
house in Cabo thanks to the national anthem? Tune in.
I will also say that 3 years in a row now we've had inside information on this, and we've hit people hard enough that it's very, very tough for me to get a bet down on this. So it's not going to be paying for me for a house in Cabo. I can tell you that.
Have you
You
received?
could shear a sheep a bunch of times. You could skin it once.
Can you say whether you have received the inside information yet? It's a little early in the week.
I have
think.
not. No.
Yeah, it's a little early in the week. We're here in Los Angeles. I brought my detectives kit.
We brought multiple people. We brought multiple people here. We have resources.
So this has been the Tuesday edition of the Forecast. I encourage you all to tune in on Thursday to find out more about how the Anthem Syndicate is feeling. Drew, pimp your great stuff because you do a ton of awesome stuff.
I mean, you can find it all at whale_capper on Twitter. The Deep Dive podcast, which I do with Andy, is, in my opinion at least, the perfect handshake to the PFF forecast.
It's a great podcast.
Because we have very like-minded philosophies, but we don't compare notes before we record. So I always get to listen to your show and kind of evaluate in a totally independent way, like, where were you guys? And so it's a check out the Deep Dive and doing here on behalf of NBC Sports Edge as well, doing Bet the Edge, which is our daily show where we manage to find NBA winners and talk to very interesting people in the gambling space.
Sweet. Thank you for hanging out with us. We'll see you at the Intercontinental Bar later this evening. Love you guys. Peace.